Hello there, and a very warm welcome. Adam Eason here, and today I'm talking all about self-reflection, R-E-F-L-E-C-T. Find out what it means to me. So this is based upon something that I teach on my hypnotherapy diploma courses, that most therapists, teachers, and other sort of professionals do engage in, and it's the process of reflective practice. Now, there are many systematic forms of reflective practice, especially in the fields of teaching and formal psychotherapy. Reflective practice is usually associated with learning from experience, and it's viewed as an important strategy for anyone that's seeking to embrace lifelong learning and self-development. The act of reflection is seen as a way of promoting our own development, and engaging in reflective practice is also associated with attempting to close the gap between theory and practice. We often know and understand theoretically what we want to do, but sometimes fail to practically do it, or necessarily, or rather take the necessary action that's required to do it. So back in the late 1990s, the work of Platzer identified that learning through reflection is more potent if there's an understanding of frameworks that encourage a sort of structural process to guide the act of reflection. And there's no right or wrong model, but at the end of this video, what I'm going to do, in addition to everything else, the kind of slightly looser stuff that I'm going to speak about, I'm also going to give you a structured evidence-based model that you can apply and use yourself as well. The most important aspect of engaging in reflection for learning and for development is the ability to demonstrate a changed conceptual perspective. And that is that the process of reflection leads to more than just a gain in knowledge. It should also challenge the concepts and the theories by which you make sense of knowledge. When you reflect on a situation, for example, you don't simply see more, you see differently. Reflection is much like what Kolb referred to as experiential learning, as I said earlier. So I'm just going to share a slide with you now to highlight and demonstrate and illustrate Kolb's model of experiential learning. Excuse me one moment while I do that. So you should be able to see now, and we've got this Kolb's cycle of experiential learning here, and it sort of shows and highlights the experience, the concrete experience, that is, where you have an experience of some kind, and then you reflect, upon that. You review it, you reflect upon the experience. There's some kind of conceptualization of that experience, you learn from it, and then you act upon what you've learned, you try out what you've learned, and there's some active experimentation and planning before you then have further concrete experiences. So this is what Kolb referred to as experiential learning. I'll just kind of bring me back, So I'm going to share a couple of slides later on as well. So I just want to sort of be less formal for a little bit. When we talk about self-reflection, Richard Carlson states that self-reflection is one of the most underused yet powerful tools for success. So to just kind of sidestep and frame this a little bit, who are you? It's one of the more polite derogatory chants commonly heard in football stadiums when opposition fans want to question the ability of a member of their opposition team, a particular player, for example, within that team. And I regularly attend Premier League football games with my son, and it's a chant that we're very familiar with. Some dictionaries even suggest it may have been in common use in the mid-19th century in London, again as a means of an insult to that person that's on the receiving end of the chant. Who are you? So I'm imposing this question, who are you? And when it's not intended as a derogatory question or even a chant, consider it as a means of provoking yourself to have a think about who you really are, or indeed who we as humans really are, and why it can be a source of great help and comfort in times of trial to know who we really are. I mean, currently in these days of isolation and social distancing, the opportunity for self-reflection for many is enhanced. On the one hand, increased self-reflection can become a useful, positive line of inquiry that allows us to become more comfortable with who we are and who we really are at our core, and our essence. On the other hand, self-reflection can also become a vehicle by which we drive ourselves into a space of anxiety and worry, and even recriminations about how we are perceived if we're not careful, or about what we have achieved or have not achieved, or even what will become when some sort of normality is restored to our lives. So why does self-reflection matter? As the old adage goes, the famous saying goes, only in absolute darkness do you see the brightest of lights. So setbacks and pain and traumas and struggle often challenge us and take us to our limits, which if crossed, can sometimes break. Many people struggle to come out of such situations and often fall into patterns of negativity and defeat. On the other hand, some people are able to focus their thoughts on what can be salvaged, how things can be turned around. They work on balancing, clearing their energies, and start entertaining thoughts based upon what they want instead of what they do not want. So a higher degree of resilience increases the effectiveness of one's response towards life's difficulties. We all know that. Having this ability to handle adversity also can make life more fulfilling. So studies have shown that we can potentially rewire our response to adversity, thereby over time increasing our emotional intelligence, our EQ, from low to high. And this means one can actually work on consciously developing certain abilities. And that's where self-reflection becomes so useful, in the development of emotional intelligence, EQ. People with high levels of EQ perceive themselves as having more control and influence in adverse situations than those with lower EQs. Even in situations that seem overwhelming or out of their hands, those with a high EQ invariably find or interpret some part of the situation to be under their control, whereas people with a lower EQ tend to give up more easily. Those with high EQs hold themselves accountable for dealing with situations regardless of the cause, while those with lower EQs tend to lapse into victimization and helplessness or even blame. And people with higher EQs have the ability to feel, this too shall pass, and go on and drive themselves forward. Whereas with people with a lower EQ will tend to believe that there's no way out of certain unsavory situations. So with a higher EQ, you tend to work out what you actually want from life. Without working out what you want, it's very difficult to get closer to that. But typically with a higher EQ, you'll understand your own strengths in order to start making proper use of those strengths. And we work on our weaknesses, and at the very least, or rather at the very least, mitigate the negative impact that such weaknesses may have. And as Margaret Wheatley said, without reflection, we go blindly on our way, creating more unintended consequences and failing to achieve anything useful. So as we reflect, we raise our emotional intelligence, and likewise, reflection starts to help with our personal growth in other areas. When you set goals for yourself in any area of life, you should be required to grow and stretch in order to achieve those goals, that they're challenging enough to do that. Personal growth is perhaps one of the most beautiful experiences to be had in life. It's not always noticeable, at least until until some time has passed and you're able to reflect, or perhaps you've achieved several goals. However, don't be fooled into thinking that personal growth just happens in one big chunk. Personal growth is a daily, ongoing process. By improving yourself just a little each day, the cumulative effects add up until you've made some really significant significant progress. If you want to be twice as good as something in 6 months' time as you are today, you need to make some improvements today, tomorrow, and each day that follows. You'll benefit from having some sort of a plan, you know, or a learning plan or a development plan to help you identify deficits that you have, or to identify the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes that are required. And again, you know, reflection is what helps you to identify these. You know, as you seek to become the person you want to be, you reflect upon yourself to identify you know the areas that or the things you need to work on. In addition to this, you know, on a daily basis, you benefit from reviewing your performance and identifying things that you can improve upon objectively. It's not as difficult as it may sound, and it's not as potentially laborious as it may sound. I know it doesn't initially sound very sexy or exciting, but all you need to do is commit yourself to a little reflection at the end of the day or in the mornings, for example, and ask yourself some key questions to identify areas for improvement. Not only is this going to help you to experience some personal growth each and every day, but you'll also experience less stress during these trying times. Studies even show that self-reflection, you know, whether that's, you know, in a meditative way or otherwise, or in a more structured methodology, as I'm going to talk about shortly, it's a powerful method to reduce stress and enable people to go on to make better decisions. A 2017 study by Gino and colleagues at Harvard Business School was researching UK commuters, and also found a similar result with those that were prompted to use their commute to think about and plan for their day, were happier, more productive, and less burned out than people who did not do so. So engaging in perhaps meditative self-reflection and gaining increased control of inner experiences provides us with a sense of control over fear and perhaps some of the chaos of life. So some of the key areas for self-reflection, you know, I mean, everybody has different ways of self-reflecting, and you know, I don't just want to state that there's one particular way. I'm going to offer some sort of systematic and standardized ways of doing it at the end today. But self-reflection, it's about letting experiences, endeavors, encounters, and actions pass through your mind, where you can form an opinion and learn from it. And you know, respond to it objectively. You know, so it's very different to just ruminating, for example. More importantly, it's a way to uncover whether you're still on track, and or what needs to be done to refocus. It means, you know, accepting some risk on occasions, and being able to learn from failures or develop as a person. But think about your life. Think about kind of, you know, leading your life. Think about self-reflection in terms of it being you leading your life as opposed to your life leading you. You know, you stop being a passive recipient to life when you engage in really good quality self-reflection. You know, you may take a pen and a piece of paper out daily and journal. As far as your self-reflection is concerned, you might find some quiet, some solitude, and reflect upon successes as you uncover what led to them. You know, what was it you did that led to that success? The same goes for your struggles. What led to that struggle? What did you need to know, or what did you need to know how to do, for example? And importantly, what could you do differently in the future, or how could you overcome such a challenge or struggle again in the future? And as you start to think about the kind of goals that you're developing for yourself, you know, as you're thinking about what you want to achieve in sort of short term, mid-term, and long term, it's important to consistently and regularly review and reflect upon your short term, your mid-term time frames and goals. You know, and you know, these can be goals in any aspect of your life. You know, and you can start as you reflect, you can start to think, you know, are the things that you are doing right now likely to help you reach your goals? Setting time aside to self-reflect and review your goals regularly as you evaluate whether these are realistic and obtainable. And you can start to ask yourself questions, you know, where am I right now? You know, where do I want to be? In other words, you know, to verbalize how far away you are from achieving a particular goal. Since, people typically, tend to set some goals, but in the midst of making efforts and swimming towards those goals, sometimes we lose ourselves in them, or we lose them. So it's important to identify the goal first and keep on reminding ourselves of the progress we're making to it. So this is an important part of self-reflection. And self-reflection wants to lead to figuring out the next steps. It's important to ask yourself those questions that help you identify the next steps after understanding what's going on. So again, there's going to be questions to help you identify what to do next, and what you should already know what the answer to the questions are if you actually carefully reflected upon yourself. A core question to ask yourself, is should I stay where I am? Your question might also be, how should I work towards my goal? Which is a bit broader. There's more space for you to think of the answers in the next steps. You might find an article that I wrote about problem solving. Problem solving therapy is something that I teach in my diploma courses, but it's something, a sort of self-help mini version that I put together in an article about problem solving. Would be helpful with regards to this particular point. I've included a link in the write-up to this as a result. It's an article called "Apply Problem Solving to Yourself." You can Google it, but there's a link in the write-up wherever you're watching this. And then, of course, this should be leading us towards one of the most important parts after analysing some of these factors, and reflecting. What do you do? Most of us will have some sort of answers in mind. So what really matters is whether you're willing to make the effort and take the action that's required. Once you're aware of answers, you can start to develop a strategy. But what really matters then, of course, is the implementation. And you want to make it enjoyable and stimulating and rewarding. It's so easy to lose ourselves amongst distractions of life, but we still want to know and be aware of our priorities. The implementation part is so important. Instead of feeling demotivated and unproductive while having no idea of what you're doing, at least you know where to start, having self-reflected. By harnessing the power of self-reflection, we can start to build ourselves into better humans, and above all, provide self-compassion and ultimately a more compassionate society. That's what we're all likely to benefit from right now. I'm going to share with you a standardized process, a model of reflection that's used in therapy and in teaching, to give you an idea of how to, if you wanted to sort of structure a process rather than be sort of looser and more meditative. So I'm just going to share my screen again. One moment. So there we go. So you should be able to see this now. And this is Gibbs' model of reflection, a 1988 model. And it specifically refers to key processes within reflection itself, rather than reflection as a process within general learning. So it's a cyclical model, or more accurately, it's a sort of functional framework for reflective study of oneself, and it assumes sort of experiential contexts. Okay, and it's split into these 6 key areas, as you'll be able to see on this on this diagram. So if you think about a particular event, for example, you'll describe it. You'll write down and describe it. Where did it happen? What happened? Who was involved? What was the context? What were the results? And just describe the event or the thing which you are reflecting upon. And this is more aimed at kind of specific aspects of life. Like I said, it's a kind of experiential context that you'll be looking at, and perhaps something that repetitively happens in your life, or something that you don't do, or something that you do poorly, for example, or something that you struggle with. And you can think of a typical example, and then you've got the description. So I keep pointing over here because that's where my screen is with the slides that are on it. And then you'll jot down your feelings and your thoughts, your external and internal feelings and thoughts, during the event, prior to it, and after it. And you know, you want to be doing this objectively. So you want to be free of any emotive aspect of the experience before doing it. So you can be objective and neutral with regards to it, and you don't want sort of your emotions to flavor your reflection. And then you want to evaluate it, you know, so think about the judgments regarding any reasons behind the event and its possible consequences. Then you can analyze it, and it's important that you've not analyzed it prior to now. So that is when we talk about the analysis, you want to look at any positives and negatives within the event, you know, the personal roles that happened within the event. And then you know, you can start to draw some conclusions. You know, what kind of insight can you gain from this? The creation of insight through the reflective process towards individual roles within the event can be considered. You know, and you can start to think, well, is there something different I could have done, or something different I may do next time? And ultimately, we want this to lead to an action plan. You know, where you recognize and the kind of reflections that you've had, the recognitions then lead towards some behavioral adjustments where you're faced with similar events in the future. You know, so what's going to happen next time out, or if I'm faced with this scenario on another occasion. So my own reflective practice form that I use for self-reflection as well goes something like this, and I'll just put the slides up. It's very similar to the Gibbs model, you know, and the reason I'm showing you the Gibbs model is because I'm so fond of it. So, you know, the reflection point, you know, what actually happened, was there a problem or a critical incident, for example, and then, you know, jotting down and being aware of the cognitions I had, the emotion, you know, so what did I think and feel at that point that I'm reflecting upon? What did I do? What were my behaviors? What were my actions, for example? Then what happened as a result of those actions? So what were the consequences? And then analyzing it, you know, what does that mean for you personally? What did that mean for me personally? And then evaluating it, you know, what was good about that? What could have been better about that, about the situation, and about what it meant and how I acted and so on. And what else have I learned? And then, you know, what are the alternative options? What could you potentially do in the future? And what deficits have you highlighted or have you noticed as a result of this? You know, is there anything you need to acquire in order to deal with this better or differently in the future? And then what will you actually do in the future? So this is the form that I use to self-reflect upon specific things, or upon you know, ways in which I've dealt with things, and it's something that I give to my students to use it in therapy, for example, as well as within their own lives. So there you have it. That's all about self-reflection. Whether you use a system like those that I've indicated here, or if you use self-reflection in perhaps a less structured or perhaps a more meditative fashion, as I've discussed earlier, I think it'll be of great value to you, and I hope you benefit wonderfully from it. So do subscribe to this channel. Do go visit my college website for details of training courses and online resources. I send you my very best wishes. Goodbye for now.